Do you know someone in foster care? Have you been in foster care? Do you have a child in foster care? Are you a grandparent or relative caring for a family member? Are you considering becoming a foster parent? Then tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860 AM to engage in thought-provoking conversations with families and providers about child welfare services, both locally and nationally. Together, we can save our children.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and I have in the studio with me attorney Lance Jones and Sean Roby, co-host. And we're glad to be with you all on this afternoon. Attorney Jones is coming from an organization by the name of Kids Matter, and we're going to be talking about what their program offers in terms of advocating for children and children who are in relative as well as in foster care. If you would like to join this conversation, please feel free to call 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. So throughout the course of this forum, we're going to seek to identify what advocacy services are available for families caring for children via court-appointed special advocates and the other Kids Matter programs. And then we're also going to learn about the 3 different types of kinship cares in Wisconsin, as well as identify some formal barriers to kinship care and just some basic information around grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren. Again, if you'd like to join this conversation, please feel free to call 414-444-5250. I'm not sure exactly why I'm not getting that number correct today, but that's 414-444-5250. We also know that October is Domestic Violence Prevention Month. It's National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's also Fire Protection Month. And I found out today that it's Dwarfism Month. I didn't know anything about being Dwarfism Month, but I guess there's a month for everything in America. So if you know a dwarf or something, just wave at them. I don't know. But today is a great day, and we're going to be talking about advocating for children who are in relative and in foster care. And as you know, some of you may know that there's an old African adage or saying that it takes a whole village to raise a child. And I think that is premises based on community and kinship care. It's a very natural model that a lot of folks in the African American community, I think, post-slavery or during the slavery era and then civil rights era, Civil War era, post-Civil War era, that we had to adopt the idea or take on the responsibility of taking care of children whose parents were no longer in their lives for one reason or another. So kinship care is nothing that's new to a lot of communities, not just African-American communities, but established communities across the globe. And so we will be delving into that a little bit, and we also will be inviting someone to come in who specializes in kinship care in Wisconsin to talk with this audience in the next month or so. But we're going to have an introduction to that conversation on today. Good afternoon, Attorney Lance Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Reed. Glad to be with you.
Well, sir, we're glad to have you on Fresh Start today, and I think this is a very relevant topic that we're going to be exploring on today as it relates to relative care and foster care and how each one of those models of care impacts children's lives. And what's going to be really important is about the services that we can get to children and families who have stepped up to say that we want to care for children who have been displaced or abused and neglected. So if you can, to start this conversation, can you talk about what is Kids Matter and what is your role over at Kids Matter, including some of the programs that are offered there?
Love to do it. Kids Matter is a nonprofit organization based here in Milwaukee.
Okay.
That focuses on serving young people who are being raised by someone other than a parent. Now, that could be a grandparent, an auntie or uncle, or perhaps an older sibling. Other children are cared for by foster parents who are not related to them. But whatever the situation where a child is in out-of-home care, not being raised by a parent, that is something that may be on Kids Matter's radar.
Okay. And so you said that there could be children who are placed with a relative, a blood relative. That can be grandma, granddad, uncle, aunt, cousin. What about a fictive kin?
Fictive kin, or sometimes as we call it in African American community, play family.
Play family. We all got cousin. That's
Play
my
cousins.
cousin. That's,
Yeah.
that's my auntie.
cousin.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So they can receive services through Kids Matter.
The fostering healing program at Kids Matter can work with fictive kin who have a pre-existing relationship with the child.
So first, let's begin by talking about what are the programs that are offered at Kids Matter.
Okay, there are two main programs.
Okay.
First is fostering healing.
Okay.
That's a program that works with relatives and like kin folks, those play aunties and uncles, who are stepping forward to provide a home for a child who, for whatever reason, cannot live with mom or dad. This is voluntary. Fostering healing frequently supports, I'm going to say grandparent, because usually we're working with grandparents.
Okay.
Supports this grandparent by providing social work advice, legal assistance as is needed to carry out the plan for providing a safe, permanent, loving home for the younger relative.
Okay. So you provide targeted in-home supportive services to that grandparent or relative that's caring for their relative child. Okay.
We will meet Granny where she wants to be met.
Now, you keep saying granny, so is the emphasis, because I know according to some national data that 2.5 million grandparents are raising their grandchildren in America, and there's approximately, I've seen data around 4.5 million children who are in the care of their grandparents, and then U.S. Census data from 2010 is saying 8 million. So there's a lot of children who are placed in their grandparents' care. And what are some of the reasons or circumstances around that you've seen where children have come into the care of their grandparents?
Yeah, and absolutely I say granny because usually it is a grandparent, could be grandfather or
But mostly grandma.
or grandma and grandpa together. But
Okay.
here in Milwaukee County, let's
Okay,
get to the real.
local. All right.
Here,
Yeah.
20,000 children this moment are living with someone who's not a parent. About 80% of those caregivers are grandparents.
Wow.
And that's in our backyard.
Now, Felix, we're going to be answering your call and just taking your call in just a few minutes, but we just want to get a little bit further into this dialogue before going to the phone line. But thanks for calling, Felix. So about 80% of these 20,000 children are in the care of their grandparents or grandma.
Grandparents or grandma.
And what are some reasons or situations, circumstances that are leading these children to come into grandma and granddad's care?
There are some familiar reasons.
Yeah.
One or both parents are incarcerated.
Okay.
Perhaps one or both parents are struggling with addiction.
Okay.
Unfortunately, children can be in need of care because a parent has been murdered.
Wow.
Or a parent has mental health issues
Okay.
that disable him or her from being the day-to-day caregiver of the child.
Okay.
These are all reasons that a lot of grandparents and other relatives step up to take care of the younger relatives and reach out for help in doing that.
But let me say this, because a lot of times we say the term grandma, or granddad, grandparents, we just automatically assume that we're talking about folks who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. But we're seeing that teenage pregnancy is a reality, and there are some younger grandparents, who are probably in their 30s, early
Absolutely.
30s, So when you say grandparents, it's inclusive of younger grandparents as well. Are you working with younger grandparents, and is that different than working with older grandparents in terms of services? And
It is different in terms of the challenges that the caregivers may face.
Okay.
I'm 50 years old.
Okay.
I'm not as fast as I was when I was 30.
Okay.
If I had to chase after a
2-year-old.
2-year-old,
12 or 2.
yeah. 12-year-old might say, "Who are you, old man? What you gonna do?"
Right.
There are different challenges when you're older. There's also a change in expectations of the educational system.
Okay.
When older grandparents, the things that they dealt with when their children were in school, academically, socially, may have changed. For example, again, I'm 50. When I was in junior high school, there was no internet. MTV still ran videos.
Okay.
And
YouTube was non-existent.
YouTube was non-existent, and an electric car was something from back in the history books.
Right, right. So clearly grandparenting is an honorable position and role to have in a child's life, but when you're going the second round of parenting, and given the era that you're parenting in, all of those factors can present some very unique challenges in you carrying out this role of grandparent. And so some of those challenges for both the grandparent as well as for the grandchild. And something I was talking about it, that becoming a caregiver for a grandchild impacts all aspects of a person's life. As a result, grandparents raising grandchildren face a number of challenges. They often have legal difficulties relating to or obtaining guardianship, enrolling their children in school, and accessing medical care for their grandchildren. They also have concerns related to custody battles with other grandparents or their grandchildren's parents. These are all realities. And do you see that in your work, that sometimes, I think we were talking the other day, you're talking about the race to the courthouse, and how does something like that impact children? And what are ways that you think that maybe grandparents on both sides can work together in the best interest of that child who needs care?
Absolutely. When the parents are unavailable, it's commonly known to both sides of the family.
Okay.
If the father's involved, parental grandmother's going to know dad's gone, I haven't seen the baby's children, and somebody, whether it was one of the parents, perhaps it was child welfare or law enforcement, may have dropped the child off with me.
Okay.
I'm trying to deal with school. I take my grandbaby to school, and I say he needs to be enrolled in K4.
Okay.
He's ready for school. I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any documentation that shows that you're a guardian or a parent. There are certain things that you can't sign.
Right.
You can't sign consents for medical care.
Right.
You can't sign
For IEP.
for an IEP,
Which is an individual education plan.
Yeah,
Right.
If
Okay.
the young person needs special education.
Right.
There are many things that grandparent cannot do without legal guardianship.
And even with mental health services, like signing off for a psychological evaluation or something of that nature.
Exactly.
Felix, you are on Fresh Start today. Thank you for your patience. Do you have a question or comment as relates to this topic we're discussing today?
Well, the topic of foster care. I've got a little experience with that. Since the age of 9 to the age of 19, I was in 4 foster homes. I was in a group home. I was in an orphanage, and I also ran away. So just about anything that a kid can go through, I've done it.
Okay.
So I have a lot of insight on foster care and what goes through with a child, a young man or young person in those situations.
Okay. And so, Felix, do you have a question? I appreciate you sharing that information. Do you have a question as it relates to foster care?
Well, my question is, and my comment more than a question is that, many times, in my case anyway, I can only speak for myself, there's a lot of abuse. And the agency that is in control of that child never finds out. And the reason why they don't find out is because the child, myself included, is in fear of itself in the environment that it's in. For myself, I will be told, we knew when the social worker was coming, and I will be shut down, and I will be looked at. I can look forward to vision as I'm driving home to Green Bay right now, as I'm stitched.
So, Felix, and I think your call is really important. We had some breakup there, but if I'm understanding you correctly, are you suggesting, or what you're saying, is that perhaps there is some abuse that's going on, a lot of abuse that's going on in foster homes?
That's not even been acknowledged, and it won't be acknowledged because even the child, as I was saying, when I'm in front of the mother, knowing that the social worker's coming, she'd say to me, if you say anything to her, you're going to get a whooping. I remember them saying that to me all the time. So when the social worker will come in the door with her nice clothes, with a little briefcase, sit down and talk to me and say, how's everything going? And behind her shoulder, we're seeing the fourth mother, I would obviously say everything is great. I don't know what the answer is for that, but I can tell you that happens a lot.
Okay. Well, you know what? One, we apologize you had that experience while you're in the care of the system, and I imagine that there are children out there who are in some abusive situations while in out-of-home care, and maybe there's a way that we can do some advocacy around supporting those children, and then we have this program like CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocates through Kids Matter, and Attorney Jones today is going to be talking about that program because they do a lot of advocacy work, and I'm sure that they probably have ran into situations like this or can provide some type of guidance on what children can do or what the other adults on that team can do to really control for safety of that child. But thank you for calling, Felix, and you have a great day.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. So we talked about the first program that you have, which is the Fostering Healing program, and then the second major program is the Court Appointed Special Advocates, right?
That's correct.
Okay, but then there's some subsets, I think, to each one of those two programs. So before we go into CASA or Court Appointed Special Advocates, let's go back to Fostering Healing, and then the subset of that, which is
Family Connections.
Family Connections. Okay, and so what is Family Connections exactly?
Okay, Family Connections is a program that incorporates home visiting. So staff going out to visit the relative caregiver, as well as a suite of services intended to help that caregiver maintain that child in the home. So let's say grandma calls Kids Matter.
Okay.
It's a confidential, free, and voluntary call. We are not part of formerly the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare, now the Division of Milwaukee Child Protective Services.
Okay.
We're not part of that. We're an independent 501c3 nonprofit. Granny calls and says, "Hello, I'm calling about the Family Connections program. I'm having real tough time. I've got 4 grandbabies here. They're different ages, different schools want different documentation from me. I'm told that one child can go on a field trip, but one can't because there's not a parental consent. I need to get vaccinations for them. I took them to my family doctor, and she said she cannot give them vaccine because I don't have any sort of guardianship papers showing that I have the right to seek medical treatment for them."
Okay.
Now, I'm committed. I'm going to keep my grandbabies, but can you help me? Notice that in this account, I didn't see anything about how the children came to be with grandmother.
Right.
They just are there.
They're there.
And that's the important thing. We meet the relatives where they are. And it's like, okay, now, grandma, here's what we can do. It's like, ask, what is the nature of the relationship with either or both parents? Is there communication? Is there a relationship to build on?
Okay.
So that you can try to proceed with voluntary means. Is the mother available to sign things if you ask her?
Okay.
If not, when was the last time that you saw her? Can you reach her if you need to get a signature or a consent? Depending upon the answers to these questions, there are different types of assistance that can be provided. If there is a good working relationship between one or both parents and the relative caregiver, one might suggest a power of attorney.
Okay.
It's probably the worst title for something ever, but a power of attorney is basically a permission slip for another relative to do what needs to be done for your child.
Okay, so do they have some legal guardian rights? I mean, how is power of attorney different from being a legal guardian?
A power of attorney, under recent legislation in Wisconsin a couple of years ago,
Okay.
there's a specific form that you use, doesn't require the involvement of an attorney, does not require the involvement of children's court.
Okay.
It simply requires the parent who's granting the permission slip to Granny or the other relative to state in that document, what are you giving this person permission to do for your child? Are you giving permission for school only? Are you giving permission for let's say medical care,
mental health services, behavioral
mental
health.
health evaluation.
Okay.
What are you giving permission for?
So it could be limited to medical or limited to making health decisions about medical health decisions or, yeah, okay. So with that, so is this a standard form that you just pull out a piece of paper and start writing down, have both parties sign, notarize? What?
It's a form. Certain elements are required.
Okay.
And you could contact Kids Matter.
Okay.
And get assistance with obtaining a copy of the form. The form is free.
And so how do they call you? I mean, what's the number?
Area code 414-344-1220.
344-1220. And that's to get assistance with power of attorney form. And now, do you assist with completing that form, or you just basically, what does that look like?
Yes, we can assist a parent, strike that. We can assist a caregiver,
Okay.
relative caregiver,
Okay.
granny,
Okay.
with completing that form.
Okay.
Now, here's the warning about powers of attorney.
Okay.
Not all organizations that you encounter will accept a power of attorney as a basis for providing service to a child.
Like which agencies,
For example,
organization?
many healthcare organizations will not
Okay.
accept a power of attorney
Okay.
as a basis for providing medical or mental health treatment to a child.
Okay.
Typically, health organizations will require legal guardianship. So, legal guardianship, unlike power of attorney, does involve the Milwaukee County's Children's Court. It does require the grandparent or the other relative caregiver or even a like kin person
Okay.
to get a different form, which is also free.
Okay.
It's available on the internet. You can also get it from Kids Matter. But that form starts a guardianship case out at Milwaukee County Children's Court. If you are indigent, you can apply for a waiver of the filing fee for the guardianship. Otherwise, it costs, there's a filing fee that's paid to the clerk of court out at Children's Court to file for a guardianship. Now, guardianship gives the caregiver, if the guardianship is granted by Children's Court, guardianship gives the caregiver the authority to make parent-like decisions, the authority to obtain medical treatment, the authority to make educational decisions, the authority to make decisions about where the child lives.
Okay.
Guardianship does not terminate parental rights.
I was going to ask about that.
But it does transfer the authority to make decisions about the child
On behalf of...
to the guardian
Okay.
until such time as the Children's Court either modifies the guardianship or reverses it and says this child is ready to go back to parental care.
Okay. So let me ask this, because finance is a factor. Money is a factor. A lot of people want to take care of their loved ones, their grandchildren, their nephews, their nieces, but in reality, there's some economic challenges. And so with power of attorney or with legal guardianship, is there a stipend available, or what benefits do they receive when they have those different types of classifications or
Benefits are not strictly related to the type of custody that a grandparent has. For example, many of your listeners may be familiar with the kinship program through the Department of Children and Families. Excuse me. You may receive, if you qualify, or I should say if the child qualifies and the caregiver is an appropriate caregiver, because there are some background check requirements, you can qualify for a kinship stipend without guardianship, even without power of attorney.
Okay. Well, we have a caller on Fresh Start today. Annette, do you have a brief question or comment as it relates to this topic we're discussing today?
Yes, I do. It's very brief. Sir, if maybe he can answer it. Back then they had what you call a ZEBLI fund or a Social Security grant for parents that had children with problems. And I was one of those parents. My question to your guest is, when you have a child that received funds and you've taken care of that child, make sure their needs are met, And is the money that you know of maybe based out of the money that the parent worked for, which I did work for, or was it the child certainly at 9 years old or whatever didn't work? I'm going through that right now with my 38-year-old son, saying that was his money, you didn't work for it, blah, blah, blah. Is this true, and how I can find out information? He has never let me forget this. And I bought a home for them to live in with it.
Okay, so basically you're saying that there was a check, and
yeah,
when you're saying some years ago the Social Security benefit, or there was a bond.
Yeah, it was like a Zebly. It's called Zebly for children that had disabilities and things like that. And I was his caregiver, his mother. And I made sure that he was taken care of, food, shelter, etc. Since that time, they
Social Security check now.
Social Security, right?
And so you want to know, where does that money come from? Does that come from money out from from your occupation, from your employment?
Yes.
Okay.
Instead of a 9-year-old, he insists it was a 9-year-old.
Okay.
And he's 38 and he doesn't get it.
Well, Annette, this is what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is have the engineer Keon get your information. That's a little bit off the topic we have, but it's an important question, and we'll get that answered for you. Then I'll give you a call back. Would that work?
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Annette.
That will work. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So now legal guardian and power of attorney, and then we're talking about now kinship care. And in Wisconsin, we were just talking with someone, and they were talking about kinship care. Mr. Robe, I'm trying to think. They were talking about there were different types of kinship care in Milwaukee. And one, there was a wait list, and with a wait list, there's no stipends, or there's no money associated with it. And so he has that information. He's going to share that with the audience right now.
Well, just in general, I believe one of the types of kinship that she mentioned was voluntary kinship, but then you have the court order kinship, and those are the two where you would be able to receive some type of stipend. But then that third type was the wait listed, where there's no funding available, but you're wait listed, so you could potentially be able to receive funds when there's funding available.
And so in a couple of weeks, we're going to have someone come on from the department, from county level, that's going to talk about kinship care, and there's various types. And we just assume that when you get kinship care that you automatically will get a stipend, but that may not be true. And that some kinship care is not income based as well. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that and have an informed conversation around that. But as it relates to kinship care that we're talking about, public formal kinship care, that is the kinship care where the child is in the legal custody of the state, or a child welfare agency places them in a provider's home or their relative's home. So that's kinship in a relative's home. So we'll talk about what that kinship care model is, and that type of kinship care model is what you all help people with, right? When it comes down.
Well, we work with both types.
Oh, with both types? Okay,
right, because there's the kinship care prior to any court involvement.
Prior to, okay.
And then there's kinship once there is court involvement, either through a guardianship, which, remember, a guardianship is a type of legal action that is started by the person that wants to take care of the child. Okay. I'm grandfather, and, I know my son is, deceased. His mother, no one's seen her in the neighborhood for a couple of months, and my grandson wants to play football. He's in school, not having any problems with that, but someone has to sign that consent for the physical and the consent to play ball. I decide it's time. I go out to children's court. I fill out the petition for guardianship. I file it. It's scheduled for a hearing. But that formal type of, that guardianship, that's a formalized type of kinship. Mm-hmm. And it's something that the family or the like-kin person has to initiate.
Okay.
That's different from things that happen once a child in need of protection and services, or CHIPS case, is initiated.
Okay.
After there's been a report that the child's been abused or neglected, that report has been investigated and corroborated by the Department of Children and Families. That's different. Then you're getting into whether or not you have court-ordered kinship.
Okay.
or foster care.
Okay.
And foster care can, as most folks know, involves a foster care payment.
Right.
And there are multiple types of foster care, but the first level of foster care is relative foster care, where the relative is licensed as a foster parent and receives the support of a state foster care worker or a worker provided by a state contractor. That's one of the big differences between kinship care, where the relative is providing the care, getting a smaller stipend, but doesn't have that administrative and casework support that a relative who decides to become a licensed foster parent receives.
Well, historically, relatives have received less support than foster parents, and that's been a major debate or issue of concern nationally. Is that you have folks who say, well, this is my grandchild, this is my nephew, my niece. We're not understanding why, how in, let's say, in treatment foster care, someone can receive anywhere upwards of $1,000+ a month to care for little Johnny, but then grandma or Uncle Bobby or Auntie Mary is only receiving a small stipend of $200-300. What is the justification, rationale? The services, supportive services may look different. There's been a huge concern around that, and I'm sure there's some justification to that argument in terms of why aren't we supporting relative care? Because it's assumed that relative care is the better environment for children to thrive in because it keeps them connected to cultural roots, communities, relationships are sustained. And the reason why I say assume, because we just assume that.
But that's also an assumption that's contained in the law. I should say not an assumption, but a presumption.
Yeah.
It's like the first effort is, by law, to reunite children with family, if possible to do so in a reasonable amount of time, given the age and developmental level of the child. If you can't reunify with family, strike that. With a parent, then a fit and willing relative is your next stop. Only if a fit and willing relative is not available at the time of the child's need.
Right.
Only then do you consider non-relative caregivers. That's the law.
But we're seeing that there's a large number of children. You had mentioned 80% of the children, these 20,000 children in Wisconsin, was that a kinship?
No, that's 20,000 in Milwaukee County.
In Milwaukee County, that's kinship. Strictly kinship is at foster care, out-of-home care.
No, that's children living with folks other than their parents, and 80% of those are grandparents.
So that 20% is out-of-home care.
So that
out-of-home care is about a 10th of that.
Wow. And well, it's really interesting because when you look at the dollars that are associated with the 80% versus the 20%, and I'm sure when you look at that, you're going to find that there's less dollars being dedicated and even resource and services to that 80%, which is relative care, versus the non-relative care. So I want to do some research on that because that seems to be interesting for me.
And I think that speaks to when you look at kinship care provider eligibility requirements, and as Attorney Jones mentioned, a fit and willing relative. But what does that mean? Adequate home space. They have to pass a series of background checks, and they only have to take minimum trainings. But then you may have somebody who comes into the foster care side, and depending on the level of care, it may be 36 hours of training, and that's even before you can get a child into your care.
But it still doesn't guarantee that even after you do 36 hours of training, go through a battery of background checks, that you're going to provide better quality of care to that child. Because we've seen the data and the outcomes for kids who have been in non-relative care versus relative care.
Right.
And national data says that, as the gentleman who first called Felix, that children who are in non-relative care are at more danger or at more risk of being abused and neglected in out-of-home care than actually in their homes. Now, that's national data information out there, but I want to harp on that too long because I want to kind of get into what CASA is. So we have the kinship care, but what are some of the barriers that you've seen with the families that you've worked with, Attorney Jones, around providing care to children who are under public child welfare agency, and how can families overcome them?
Well, one of the basic barriers is a lack of trust. And it's my experience that a lack of trust can come from two sources, one of which is an adverse prior experience, and the other is lack of prior experience.
Okay.
And just hearing stories.
Fear.
Right.
You know,
Right.
fear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fear based, I won't say ignorance, fear
Right.
based
Fear
on
based.
lack of experience.
Okay.
Another one is that there's so much change in the child welfare system, not just here in Milwaukee County, but nationwide. These are large systems that change quite a bit. And someone who may have been familiar with what child welfare was like 15 years ago would look at it today and observe that it looks totally different. There are
What about family problems? Sometimes, you want to take care of your sister's or your brother's child, but because there's some issues going on in the family, that sometimes people say, well, I don't want to.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be perceived as taking sides.
Right, right.
For example, if put grandma in the middle this time,
Okay.
you have two of your children that are seeking to take care of their niece, and the formal child welfare system comes to you and interviews you. Now, which do you think would be a better caregiver? What am I going to do? Which of your choosing between your children, or the issues of people providing care. Again, this typically involves grandparents, but it's one thing to be a grandparent, one level of involvement. Grandparents often, they know what grade their grandchild may be in, but you don't know where that child goes to school. You don't know the child's teachers. It's one thing to take over that level of responsibility for your grandchild, but how does that affect other people in your family?
Right.
It's like, how much of that time is no longer spent with your spouse?
Right.
Or going on day trips with your other grandchildren, or taking care of your own mental needs,
Okay.
or your own physical needs. Grandparents who decide to take on parenting again, as we say, they often assume a huge burden, and negative health outcomes have been associated with that for the caregivers.
Wow.
Because they're so busy taking care of the babies that they're not taking care of themselves.
And
But
that's
these grandparents can come to Kids Matter and get some type of support to help them juggle and manage this new responsibility of caring for.
a major sacrifice.
Yeah, major
Yes.
sacrifice. So I want to talk about CASA and what CASA is. Tell me, what is CASA?
CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates, and it's a program that reaches out to the community to volunteer to be an advocate for one child or a group of brothers or sisters.
Okay. Who are these children? That's in grandmas
These are children who are in the formal child welfare system.
or what we
There's-
call foster care. The foster care system or
well,
child welfare, out of home care.
in child welfare, because they
Yeah.
could be reunited with their parents, but the court case is
It's
still open.
active. So they can be in child welfare, have an open case. So can you be in foster care and in your birth family setting? It's an
Yes.
open case.
Well,
Yeah.
it's- yeah,
And a lot of
you
times we assume that foster care means that you're with a non-relative, but you can have an open case and technically you're in the system at that point.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yes. Recently, there was a change to the law that enabled trial reunifications in order to give a test run to take a child who was staying in foster care, sending them home to live with a parent, but not formally changing the placement yet.
So they're in foster care but at home.
Right.
Okay, all right. So what are the qualifications of a person who's a court appointed special
specialty.
advocate?
Yeah. And we just call them CASA volunteers.
CASA volunteers.
Volunteers.
Yeah.
Because the point is to get the kid back
Yeah.
into CASA. But CASA volunteers need to be 21 years old.
Okay.
They need to have a high school diploma or its equivalent, and they need to clear a fairly significant background check.
Okay.
After that, you have the opportunity to complete a free 33-hour training. That training takes place over 4 to 5 weeks. Here in Milwaukee County, we do it on weeknights and one weekend so that folks who work can do it.
So what is the number that people can call if they want to possibly become a CASA volunteer?
That same number, 414-344-1220.
And so what are some of the people who are volunteers? What kind of backgrounds do they have?
We have folks who do everything from the work at Quad Graphics on the line
Okay.
to doctors, attorneys, retired school teachers, stay-at-home parents who, got their education and from that point raised their children and their grandchildren.
Okay. So they can become a CASA volunteer if they go through this vetting and screening process. And how is the case referred to you? Because you mentioned that you're assigned to cases in the child welfare system. So how do you all get a case?
We get a case when a judge or a commissioner of the children's court in a child abuse or neglect case, this is not applicable in delinquency or juvenile in need of protection and services cases. In a child abuse or neglect case, says, I think that this case would benefit from having more hands, eyes, and ears working with this child,
Okay.
looking after this child, talking to members of this family,
Gotcha.
so that I, as a judge, can make better decisions and hopefully produce better results for this family.
Gotcha. I got you. So people can call that number 414-344-1220, 414-344-1220. There's a definite need to get as many men as possible to become CASA volunteers.
Amen,
and
my
why
brother.
is that important for men to become CASA volunteers?
It's so important because less than 10% of the volunteers are men, and this is a nationwide concern for CASA volunteers. In Milwaukee County, 45% of the children in the child welfare system are boys.
So we need that. Wow. So thanks a lot, Attorney Lance Jones from Kids Matter, from coming on to Fresh Start Today, sharing this important information around your programming over at Kids Matter. We're going to have a transition. We have Kathy on the line. She's going to ask a question. Right after Kathy, we're going to talk to Dennis Walton from the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative about a big event that's coming up this weekend. Kathy, you're on Fresh Start Today.
Yes. I was just checking it regarding, do they get a stipend for that when they go out and check on the kids in the foster care? They get like some kind of paid stipend, like $25, $40 each time they visit one? Or I know some of those places, it's like a small stipend they do give you.
I can understand your question, Kathy. What about a stipend? I didn't understand her question.
Mr. Reed, as I heard the question, she was asking if there's a stipend for a CASA volunteer who goes out into the community and checks on a child. Was that your question, ma'am? Okay. The answer is no.
It's a volunteer.
Yeah, court-appointed special advocates are volunteers.
Which is different because you're saying for men, the language around life coach and mentor, we kind of refer to it as that versus a CASA volunteer or crisis mentor, because a lot of crisis mentors or mentors are paid. And so their work may look a little different in terms of their, I don't want to say commitment, but the outcomes or
Well, usually in terms of the level, the amount of time they're expected to commit to it,
okay.
and the circumstances under which are expected to be available. A CASA volunteer can count on spending 10 to 14 hours a month with that child, strike that, on the case, and a lot of that time is spending time visiting the child, getting to know the child, talking to the people that care for the child.
And that's why your recommendations to the court carry a lot of weight.
That's right.
Okay.
It's
Sounds
fact-based.
Fact-based. Thanks a lot, Attorney Lance Jones from Kids Matter. You can call him at 414-344-1220 if you have any questions regarding the CASA program, the Fostering Healing program, Fostering Connections program, and all the programs they have over there at Kids Matter. We are now in studio with Dennis Walton from the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. How you doing, sir?
Good. I just want to say, man, the last subject, man, really hit home with the work that we do with the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that, about the summit. But I deal every day with fathers it's a growing need for them to have the representation that you're bringing forth, because they may have been incarcerated and the mom may have had a circumstance to where the child is being taken out of the home. And what's happening with them is their rights are immediately being revoked by the state to where they can't get back into the lives of their children. Yeah, they're terminating their rights. So this type of information is something that is definitely important, man, as far as fathers in particular knowing what their rights are.
But also to connecting the children who have been removed to the paternal side of the family.
Yeah. I mean, again, because right now, the way the state is set up, they're not giving consideration to the family, or the criteria that they're using when it comes to allowing families to be, the ones who take on the children. It's really off balance right now.
And I know they're making some progress with this family finding process that they have, and certainly there's room for improvement there. But 10, 15 years ago, we definitely are not where we're at today. So we're seeing some progress.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important because the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative, you work with how many men per year?
I can't even count.
And men from various backgrounds, from every nationality you can think of, employment sector. You work with a lot of men, but they face a lot of challenges when it comes to the judicial system or court system. They face a lot of challenges with dealing with child welfare. And so maybe there's an opportunity through that vehicle to create a healthier relationship, a more inclusive, more equitable relationship with fathers by connecting with formerly the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare, which is now the Division of Milwaukee Child Protective Services. So there's some change there, but maybe.
Well, where we're at now today is that this area of interest or awareness that needs to be brought to fathers is a new area.
Okay.
And not only that, but the work of focusing on specific social services that target the needs of men. That's a very new area for us in our community. So there are a lot of different
specific.
Yes, father-specific needs that are emerging. When we talk about things like child welfare, that's traditionally not where you see a father.
See fathers as nurturers, as caregivers. So that's a whole different shift. And we have folks who sit on the benches that don't really see fathers in a nurturing capacity. And I think that's what kind of influences what happens or outcomes in the course, and also what type of supports that men we receive from social service programs. But we want to talk about the summit is this weekend.
Yeah.
And when? What time? Where?
The summit is going to be Friday and Saturday. It's going to be at Destiny Youth Plaza. That's 7210 North 76th Street. And it's our 10th annual summit, where we do our traditional services, where we focus on core services for men. And we're going to, of course, we're going to have all of our partners in the house, SDC, the county child support services. We'll have driver's license, recovery information, job training, employment opportunities that you can find out information on getting your GED, getting into trade school, expungement, which is another one of those areas that there's a growing need to educate men. So we'll have we're working with Clean Slate Milwaukee, Shanielle McLeod, who is one of our partners as well. We'll have family court services. So, as you know, the summit is a 2-day event that allows for men to address these areas, address these needs in their lives, and get information that can help them empower themselves. So we're blessed to have our 10th annual, and this is a celebration because one of the things, all the issues that fathers deal with, we have to get men back to a place to where they're celebrating their children. There's a joy about being a father again. The system has put a lot of pressure on everybody to where, family is not given the acknowledgement that it should be given now. And we want to make sure that men are recommitting themselves to their children, to their families, and better communities.
Is there a fee associated with attending the summit?
No fee.
Do they have to register? Is it
pre-registered?
Required?
Pre-registration
on site?
Yeah, they can register on site, and they can pre-register. If you want to pre-register, you can go to www.milwaukeefatherhood.com, or you can go to SDC's website at www.cr-sdc.org.
If folks have questions, there's somebody they can call.
Yes, they can call the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. That's 414-286-5653.
If a person has not registered, can they sign up on site?
Yes, they can. So, we really want to get the resources. This year's summit is really targeted towards being effective and specific resources that men will be able to use immediately. So we just want to make sure that all the fathers are coming out and getting the help that they need.
We have a caller on Fresh Start today. Caller, do you have a brief question or comment as it relates to this topic?
Yes, the Father Initiative. You work with people visiting their parents. The dads visiting their kids and have rights for visitation. The moms are always blocking them from visiting. Do they help them out with that?
Well,
Because it's actually against the law. It's a criminal offense to not allow the child to visit the parents at all. They're always blocking the dads from visiting.
Yeah,
We need to really work on visiting.
A lot of that is about fathers knowing their rights. So
but even when fathers know their rights, it's will judges and the legal folk respect and honor that father's role in that child's life, because the father can know his rights, and there's fathers who go to court who know their right, and that this mother should be held in contempt. And she's not.
Well, I mean, when you're dealing with the court system, you have to know how to, it's multiple ways to navigate through the system. So when we talk about fathers really being able to engage the courts to where they get the support that they need to be educated properly. And that's what the summit does. It allows for us to equip them with information and how to approach the court systems to where they can be successful with their request.
What is the relationship like between Milwaukee Father Initiative and Milwaukee court system in terms, because men have problems.
It's a relationship that is being nurtured and is growing. We've been very effective with advocating on behalf of the rights of fathers over the last 10 years. So whereas you didn't see men getting some of the benefit that they're getting now in the past, it's because there's been a lot of advocacy in the courts to bring awareness to the fact that fathers have rights and that they need to be respected. But this area is one that we're barely scratching the surface on. But the awareness is, you got to think we have a summit that's going to play host to the largest number of black men in the state. And we've done that 10 years annually.
But there's Mexican, there's Hispanics, there's a number of fathers who are dealing with issues around having access to their kids, being able to build a nurturing relationship with their kid because of the response they're getting in the court environment or arena.
And see, that's why when we talk about fatherhood, it's a common denominator. It doesn't matter what color you are as a father.
Married,
all fathers are going through the same needs.
Employed, unemployed, educated, uneducated.
All of those things, and they need to know. Yes. So the Fatherhood Summit is a great opportunity for men to come out and address.
What happens after the summit, though?
Well, we do fatherhood services all throughout the year.
Like what?
All of the things that they'll be getting at the summit, they'll be able to, follow up with us and get those things after the summit. They can come to the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. We do regular workshops throughout the year building up to the summit right now. So we'll have, for those who don't have the opportunity to attend, we'll immediately have a follow-up that'll allow for the fathers to address these issues as well.
All right, so that's this Friday and Saturday, October 16th and 17th, 2015 at Destiny Youth Plaza, 7210 North 76th Street in Milwaukee. It's free and open to the public. Pre-registration is encouraged, but if you can't do that, you definitely can register on site. You can go online at www.milwaukeefatherhood.com or www.cr as in Robert-SDC.org. The event starts on Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Saturday from 7:30 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. Some of the services that you can expect to receive is employment opportunities linking to the city's outlying area jobs, driver's license recovery, child support case review, job training opportunities, education, GD, HSED, trades, CDL, etc., health screening information, expungement supportive services, family court services like bankruptcy, child placement, etc. So that's this Friday and Saturday, October the 16th and 17th. If you have any questions before then, please feel free to give Mr. Dennis Walton a call at
414-286-5653.
You need any volunteers?
Yes, we do. You can contact SDC for volunteer opportunities as well, and they can go on the website and find out how to go about that as well.
All right, Milwaukee.
And also, really quick, we're going to have a keynote. Our keynote speaker, which we were blessed to get at the last moment, is
Vin Baker.
Vin Baker.
From formerly of the Milwaukee Bucks, so that's going to be
so that'll be good.
Y'all
he has
pray
a great
for Lamar Odom. What's really going on?
I don't know. We're going to send Vin go help him out after this, man.
And all right. One last thing, maybe Kids Matter can be a part of the initiative in the upcoming future.
Yeah, we look forward to that.
So we can make that link. It's about relationship building. Can fathers bring their sons to the summit?
No, this is really focused on fathers coming and getting some work done.
Okay.
As far as covering,
but I ain't got no sitter, so you mean I can't can't find nobody. I'm just out here struggling.
They can. I'm saying they can come. They can bring their kids. They're still going to be able to get whatever they need to get done. But we really want men to be able to come and take advantage of the resources. So we didn't prepare for child care, but if you have to bring them down.
All right, just don't leave them.
Just don't leave them. Kids matter.
All right, thank you for listening to Fresh Start today. Next week we will have an attorney on with In the Courts with an Attorney, and we'll be talking about the jury trial and what parents can do before signing their rights over to their children to Public Child Welfare Agency, and so we'll be talking about that next week on Fresh Start Today.